It was a quiet night, the kind of night when the world felt still, as if nothing could go wrong. Maya sat in her small living room, the glow of the TV lighting up her tired face. Her son, Leo, had fallen asleep on the couch beside her, his small hand clutched tightly around his stuffed bear. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in front of their house. It was peaceful. Maya's mind wandered. It had been a year since her husband, David, mysteriously disappeared. One day, he was there, laughing, talking about plans for the future, and the next, he was gone. No phone call, no note, nothing. The police had no answers. The neighbors had no clues. It was as if David had vanished into thin air. Maya hadn't given up hope, though. She still wore her wedding ring every day, still held on to the hope that one day David would walk through the door, apologizing for leaving without a word. But every day, that hope faded a little more. As the clock ticked past midnight, Maya stood up to turn off the TV. She stretched her arms, yawning, and noticed a strange shadow outside her window. It was a brief flicker of movement, like someone had passed by. She frowned, brushing it off as nothing more than the wind. But then she heard something, a soft knock at the door. Maya froze. Who could be knocking at this hour? She glanced at Leo, still asleep, oblivious to the noise. Her heart skipped a beat as she slowly walked toward the door. Was it someone from the past? Someone who knew David? Or maybe someone who knew her secret? She hadn't told anyone, but the weight of it had been on her mind for days. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. When she opened it, there was no one there. But there, lying on the doorstep, was a small weathered box. It wasn't very big, just about the size of a shoebox, and it was wrapped in brown paper. The edges were frayed, the corners bent as if it had been traveling for a long time. There was no name, no return address, just the box, sitting there in the cold night. Maya bent down to pick it up. As her fingers brushed the surface of the box, she felt a strange chill run up her spine. She hesitated for a moment, her thoughts racing. Should she open it? Who would send her something in the middle of the night like this? Her heart beat faster. The box seemed important. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like it was meant for her. Maybe it was from David. Maybe it was a sign. But as she lifted it, a sudden sound echoed through the street, a siren, and then another, and another. The sirens grew louder, closer, as if they were headed straight toward her house. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She looked down the street, but there was no sign of any cars, just the flashing lights in the distance, getting closer by the second. Her hand shook as she clutched the box tightly. She turned to go back inside, but just as she did, a black car sped past her house and screeched to a halt in front of the driveway. The car door slammed open, and two officers in dark uniforms rushed out. Their eyes were sharp, scanning the street as they sprinted toward her. "Ma'am, put the box down," one of them shouted. Maya froze, her eyes wide with confusion. She hadn't even opened it yet. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew this wasn't a coincidence. The officers were serious. They looked like they were ready to do anything to get their hands on that box. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't let go of the box. "What's going on? Why do you want this box?" she asked, her voice trembling. The officer who had spoken earlier stepped closer. "Ma'am, this is part of a national investigation. You need to put it down now." Maya shook her head. "I don't understand. I just found it here, on my doorstep." The second officer approached her, his hand resting near his gun. "It's not for you to understand. Just give it to us, and everything will be okay." Maya glanced back at her house, her heart pounding in her chest. Leo was still inside, asleep, unaware of the chaos unfolding outside. She couldn't let them take the box, not without knowing what it was. Her instincts screamed at her to protect it. I can't just give it to you," she whispered, her grip tightening. Before the officers could respond, she heard another car coming up the street. This one was different. A sleek, black SUV. It pulled up beside the police car, and a man in a suit stepped out, his face hidden by dark sunglasses. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like someone important, someone with power. The man walked straight toward her, his eyes never leaving the box in her hands. "Ma'am," he said, his voice smooth but demanding, "I need you to hand over that box. It's crucial for national security." Maya felt a wave of fear wash over her. National security. Was she caught in something much bigger than she had imagined? "I'm not giving it to anyone," she said, her voice firmer now. "I don't know what this is, but I'm not letting it go until I know what's inside." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya thought he might try to take it by force. But then something strange happened. He paused, his gaze softening just a little. "You have no idea what you're holding, do you?" he asked, his voice almost gentle. Maya shook her head, her mind racing. What was this all about? Why were they so desperate for this box? Just then, Leo's voice broke through the tension. "Mom, who are they?" Maya turned to see her son standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. The officers and the man in the suit all turned to look at him. "Get inside, Leo," Maya said, her voice cracking. But as Leo stepped back inside, Maya heard the faint sound of something inside the box, something moving. The sirens were getting closer. Maya had no idea what was happening, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change forever. The morning after the strange incident outside her house, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It wasn't just the flashing lights and the police officers who had arrived the night before. It was something deeper, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The box still sat on the coffee table, unopened. The sound inside it, soft, almost like a whisper, had only grown louder in the quiet of the night. She couldn't understand why the police had been so desperate to take it, why they had acted like they knew something she didn't. As the sun rose, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Maya knew she had to figure out what was going on, and fast. For her own safety, for Leo's. She had spent the entire night staring at the box, trying to figure out its secrets. Why was it delivered to her doorstep? Who was it meant for? And why had the police been so insistent on taking it? Her mind raced with unanswered questions, but none of them seemed to bring her any closer to the truth. Maya had just poured herself a cup of coffee when her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Maya," a deep voice on the other end said. The voice was calm, almost too calm, like it was rehearsed. "This is Officer Daniels. We need to speak. It's important." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Officer Daniels. She remembered the tall, stern officer from last night, the one who had been so focused on the box. I'm not sure I should be talking to you," Maya said, her voice wavering. "What do you want with that box?" "Maya, listen to me. This is bigger than you think. You need to trust me," Officer Daniels said urgently. "There are things you don't know. Things about your husband. About you." Maya's grip on her phone tightened. "What do you mean about my husband?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Your husband wasn't just a regular man, Maya. He was involved in something we've been trying to cover up for years. And you were always meant to be a part of it. That box is a key to a system that could change everything." Maya's head spun. She glanced over at Leo, who was playing quietly in the living room, unaware of the conversation unfolding. The thought of her husband being involved in something secret terrified her. What had he gotten involved in? What had they been hiding from her all this time? "Why didn't you tell me?" Maya whispered, the pain of his disappearance hitting her again. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "We couldn't," Officer Daniels replied, his voice lower now, almost regretful. "The less you knew, the safer you were. But now it's too late." Maya felt a cold chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What's in the box?" "The box is a message, Maya," Daniels said. "It's a message from your husband, and it's meant for you. If you open it, you'll understand everything." But there are people who will stop at nothing to get their hands on it. They'll do anything to make sure you never see what's inside. You have to be careful. Maya's mind was reeling. She felt the weight of the officer's words settle in her chest, like a heavy burden she couldn't escape. Who are you, really? What's going on? Why is this happening now? I can't explain everything right now, Daniel said, his voice tight. But you're in danger. The moment you open that box, you set something in motion, something that can't be stopped. Trust me, Maya. Don't open it unless you're ready to face the truth. Maya didn't know what to believe. The officer's words felt too cryptic, too unreal. She had already lost so much, and now her husband's mysterious disappearance was being tied to something much larger. But something about Daniel's voice made her hesitate. Was he trying to protect her? Or was he part of the very system that had taken her husband? Before she could ask another question, the line went dead. She stared at the phone in her hand, the unanswered questions swirling in her mind. The silence in the house felt oppressive, almost suffocating. She glanced at the box again, its presence filling the room with an eerie weight. What was inside? Maya stood up determined. She had to know. If it was the key to everything, she couldn't keep running from it. She had to open it. Just then, the sound of a car pulling up outside broke her thoughts. Maya's heart leaped in her chest. She rushed to the window and saw a black SUV parked outside her house. Two men in dark suits stepped out and walked toward her front door. Maya's blood ran cold. She didn't know who they were, but she could feel it. They were here for the box. Without thinking, Maya grabbed the box from the table and ran to the back door. She couldn't face them. Not yet. Not without answers. She burst into the backyard, the cool air biting at her skin, but she didn't stop. She had to hide it. She had to keep it safe. Her hands trembled as she ran across the yard to the old shed at the edge of the property. Maya threw open the door, shoved the box inside, and slammed it shut just as the men reached her front door. Her pulse raced as she stepped back into the shadows, watching through the window as the men knocked on the door. She held her breath. The men spoke briefly to Leo, who was still too young to understand the situation. Maya could hear the men's muffled voices, demanding answers about the box. But Maya wasn't there to give them any answers. Not yet. Her heart pounded in her chest as the men left, getting into the SUV and driving away. But Maya knew they would be back. They were just getting started. As the door to the shed creaked closed, she felt her fingers brush the surface of the box she had hidden inside. Whatever was inside that box, it was only a matter of time before she'd have to face it. And when she did, she would finally uncover the truth about her husband, about herself, and about the people who were willing to do anything to make sure she never learned what was hidden inside. The next few days passed in a blur. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She barely slept, her mind constantly racing with questions. Why had Officer Daniels contacted her? What was inside the mysterious box? And why had these men in suits started showing up at her door? Whoever they were, they knew more about her life and her husband than she ever could have imagined. Her once quiet life had been turned upside down. The weight of her husband's disappearance, the strange encounter with the police, and the relentless sense of being watched kept her on edge. Maya had learned to trust her instincts, but now she was starting to question everything she knew. She couldn't go back to her old life. Not after everything that had happened. She had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Leo was the only thing keeping her grounded. His laughter, his innocence, helped Maya push through the fear and confusion. But even Leo could sense that something was off. He'd started asking questions that Maya couldn't answer, asking why the police had come to their house and why the men in suits always stared at their house from the street. She lied, of course, telling him it was nothing to worry about. But Leo was too sharp. Maya saw the doubt in his eyes. It was late in the evening when Maya finally decided to go back to the shed. The men in suits had left, but she knew they would return. They wouldn't give up so easily. She had to act fast. Her heart thudded as she walked to the shed, her hands trembling. She had been avoiding the box, not wanting to face the truth inside. But it was time. Time to uncover the mystery that had been haunting her for days. She needed answers. Maya grabbed the rusted handle of the shed door and pulled. The hinges creaked in protest, as if they, too, were nervous about what lay inside. She stepped into the darkness, feeling her way across the dusty floor. The box was still hidden in the corner, just as she had left it. She knelt down and wiped the dust off its surface. The box looked innocent enough, but Maya knew better. She could feel the weight of it. The secrets it held were not meant to be uncovered, but Maya wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. With a deep breath, she ripped off the brown paper and opened the box. Inside was a small, old-fashioned envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, and the handwriting on the front was barely legible. Maya's hands shook as she picked it up. There was something about the envelope that felt wrong. It was as if it didn't belong in this time, in her world. She pulled the letter out and unfolded it carefully. As she read the words, her blood ran cold. Maya, you are the key. It was always you. They are coming for you. Do not trust anyone. They know everything about you, about us, and they will stop at nothing to control what we've started. You must go to the old house, the one on Maple Street. Everything will be revealed there. They can't follow you there. The letter was signed with a name she didn't recognize. J.A. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reread the letter. She didn't understand. What did it mean? Who was J.A.? And why was she the key? The words felt like a puzzle, a riddle she couldn't solve. Maya sat back on her heels, her mind racing. She glanced around the shed, her gaze darting to the windows as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. The feeling of being watched had never been stronger. She had no idea who J.A. was, but the letter clearly meant something important. Whoever they were, they knew about the danger Maya was in, and they'd wanted her to go to Maple Street. The mention of an old house made Maya think of the house she and David had bought when they first got married. It was a small rundown place, one they had never gotten the chance to fix up. It was far from their dream home, but it had always been theirs. She hadn't thought about it in years, not since David disappeared. The house on Maple Street had been abandoned ever since. But now it felt like the key to everything. Maya glanced at the letter again, her decision already made. She had to go to that house. She had to find out what was waiting for her there. But she couldn't go alone. She wouldn't risk Leo being caught in whatever this was. She stood up, her resolve hardening. She would leave tonight. That night, as the stars hung low in the sky, Maya packed a small bag, leaving just enough behind to make it look like she was still home. She didn't know what she'd find at the old house, but she couldn't let fear stop her. Leo had already fallen asleep, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. Maya bent down to kiss his forehead, tears filling her eyes. She didn't want to leave him, but she had no choice. Whatever was coming, she couldn't face it without answers. She stepped into the cool night air, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The road to Maple Street was long, the streets dark and quiet. The wind howled, carrying with it the sounds of distant sirens. Maya's thoughts flickered back to the day David had disappeared. Had he known about this? Had he left the letter for her, knowing she would be the one to finish what they had started? As she drove, the memories of her husband flooded her mind. She missed him more than she could put into words. But she had to move forward. She had to uncover the secrets that had been hidden from her. When she finally reached Maple Street, the old house was just as she remembered. Dark, abandoned, and eerie. The windows were boarded up, and the yard had long since grown wild with weeds and overgrown grass. But something was different now. The house seemed alive with energy, as though it were waiting for her. Maya parked the car and stepped out, the air thick with tension. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. There was no turning back now. She approached the house slowly, her footsteps crunching on the gravel. As she reached the front door, she noticed something odd. A faint light coming from the basement window. A chill ran down her spine. Someone was inside. She couldn't turn back now. Maya reached for the door handle, her breath shallow. She pushed it open, the creak of the door echoing in the silence of the night. Inside, the house was dark, but she could feel the presence of something, or someone, watching her. It was time to find the truth. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped over the threshold of the old house. The door creaked shut behind her, and she was plunged into darkness. For a moment, the silence was deafening, broken only by the soft sound of her breath and the echo of her footsteps on the dusty wooden floor. She fumbled for her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the space in front of her. The house was just as she remembered, cold, empty, and decaying. The floorboards were worn, the walls covered in layers of peeling wallpaper. Cobwebs clung to the corners of the rooms, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. But there was something different now. A strange energy hung in the air, like the house itself was waiting for her. Maya couldn't explain it, but she felt as though she had crossed into another world. This wasn't just a house. It was a place where secrets were kept, a place where the past and present collided. She moved cautiously through the rooms, the beam of her flashlight revealing nothing more than forgotten furniture and shattered picture frames. The living room was empty, save for a single chair that sat in the middle of the room, facing the fireplace. Maya paused for a moment, feeling an odd sense of dread wash over her. What was she supposed to find here? Why had she been led to this abandoned house? The letter from J.A. hadn't given her any answers, only more questions. Maya's eyes wandered toward the hallway, where the staircase led to the second floor. But it was the door to the basement that drew her attention. It was partially open, and a faint light flickered from below. The basement was the only part of the house that felt alive, like it held something that could change everything. She couldn't wait any longer. Her hands shaking, Maya made her way toward the basement door. The faint light from below beckoned her, urging her to come closer. She stepped carefully down the wooden steps, the air growing colder with each passing step. The light flickered once more before disappearing into the darkness. As she reached the bottom, the beam of her flashlight swept over the room. What she saw nearly took her breath away. The basement was no longer just a dusty storage space. It had been transformed into something strange. The walls were covered in what appeared to be old, faded maps that seemed to detail locations all over the world. But there was something more unsettling about them. The locations marked on the maps were not places Maya recognized, but the symbols surrounding them were unmistakable. They were symbols from her husband's past, the symbols he had kept hidden from her, the ones she had never understood. The room was filled with old books, scattered papers, and strange devices she didn't recognize. At the far end of the basement, a large table stood, covered in clutter. But it wasn't the table that caught her attention. It was the object lying on it, a small black box, exactly like the one she had received at her doorstep. Her pulse quickened. This couldn't be a coincidence. The same box, the same mysterious symbols. This was no accident. She had been led here for a reason. But by whom? Maya approached the table cautiously, her flashlight beam resting on the box. She couldn't explain it, but there was a magnetic pull to it. The moment her fingers brushed the surface of the box, a sudden jolt of electricity shot through her body. She gasped, pulling her hand back, but the sensation lingered, a buzzing in her fingertips. Before she could react, the basement door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into darkness. Maya froze, her heart racing. Her breath quickened as she fumbled for the flashlight, but before she could turn it on, a voice echoed from the shadows. Maya. The voice was low, male, and unmistakable. It was David's voice, her husband's voice. Her breath caught in her throat. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" The room was still, the silence stretching long and heavy. Then, the sound of footsteps echoed across the room, growing louder and closer. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she spun around, shining the flashlight in every direction. But there was no one there. Maya. This time, the voice was clearer, closer, almost as if it were right behind her. She whirled around, her heart in her throat, but still saw no one. She was alone, or at least, she thought she was. Maya. The voice came again, and this time, there was no mistaking it. It was coming from the box on the table. A cold chill swept through her as she approached the table once more. The black box sat there, still and silent. But now, the symbols on the box seemed to pulse with a faint glow, as though they were alive. Maya's hands trembled as she reached out again, this time more carefully. She picked up the box, feeling the weight of it in her hands. The moment her fingers closed around it, a series of images flashed before her eyes. Images of David, of the life they had shared, of the days before his disappearance. But these weren't just memories. These were visions, glimpses of the truth, of things she had never known. David was part of something much bigger than she could ever imagine. He had been involved in an organization, a secret group that controlled information, power, and technology far beyond anything Maya had ever dreamed of. And that organization, it seemed, was still watching her. The images stopped as suddenly as they had begun, leaving Maya breathless, her head spinning. She dropped the box onto the table, staggering back as the weight of the truth settled over her. Her husband hadn't disappeared. He had been part of something dangerous, something that had now come for her. The truth was out there, hidden in plain sight. And now Maya was in the middle of it all. Maya. The voice came again, louder this time, more urgent. She spun around, but this time, there was someone standing in the shadows, a figure in a dark suit, their face obscured. Maya, you have to leave, the figure said, their voice low and gravelly. They're coming. Maya's blood ran cold. Who are you? She demanded. What do you want with me? We're the ones who've been keeping you safe, the figure replied. But your husband's actions, his involvement, have put you in danger. The moment you opened that box, you unleashed something we can't stop. You have to leave now, before it's too late. Maya's mind raced. Who were these people? Why were they helping her? And what did they mean by too late? Before she could ask any more questions, the figure stepped forward, reaching into their jacket pocket and pulling out something small, a key. This key will open the door to the truth, the figure said. But be careful, Maya. The truth you're seeking is not without its price. With that, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Maya standing alone in the dark basement, her mind whirling with unanswered questions. The key, the truth, it was all coming together. But the more she'd uncovered, the more dangerous it became. The truth was out there, and it was more than Maya could have ever imagined. Maya stood alone in the dimly lit basement, the key in her trembling hand. The strange man had disappeared without a trace, leaving her with more questions than answers. The cold weight of the key seemed to pull her towards the door at the far end of the room. She felt an overwhelming sense of urgency, but she couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her insides. The figure's warning echoed in her mind. The truth you're seeking is not without its price. She swallowed hard and looked around the basement one last time. The boxes, the papers, the mysterious maps, they all felt like part of an elaborate puzzle. But what was the missing piece? What had she missed in all the chaos? What was David really involved in, and why had he left her the box? There was only one way to find out. Taking a deep breath, Maya walked toward the door at the far end of the basement, the key still clutched tightly in her hand. The key was heavy, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. As she reached the door, the sense of dread intensified. She could almost feel the unseen eyes watching her, waiting for her to make her move. The door was old, made of worn wood and rusted hinges. She slid the key into the lock, her hands shaking. With a click, the lock turned. Maya slowly pushed the door open, her heart pounding in her chest. The air behind the door was thick with dust and old memories. But there was something more, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Inside, the room was bare, except for a single desk in the middle. A small lamp lit the area with a soft, yellow glow, casting long shadows across the walls. On the desk was a thick folder, neatly stacked with papers. It looked like something official, something important. Maya stepped forward, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She hesitated for a moment, then reached for the folder. As she opened it, her eyes widened at what she saw. It was a set of files, documents, photos, and records that told a story she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. The first photograph was of David, but it wasn't the David she remembered. This was a younger version of him, standing next to a group of men and women she didn't recognize. They were all wearing dark suits, their faces serious. Behind them, a logo was stamped on a large building, an organization Maya had never heard of before. The files revealed a hidden world, a world her husband had been deeply involved in, a world full of secrets, codes, and government operations. Maya flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling as she read. David had been part of a covert group, one that dealt with high-level operations, international intelligence, and classified information. But what struck Maya the most was one file, marked with bold letters, Project Nemesis. It was a project David had been working on before his disappearance, a project that had the potential to change everything. Maya's heart raced as she read further. Project Nemesis was a global operation, one that used advanced technology and psychological warfare to manipulate entire populations. David had been assigned to a special task force. His role was to oversee a network of operatives across the world. The files were filled with mission reports, blueprints for devices that could control minds, and notes on experiments that seemed impossible. But there was something else. The final page contained a handwritten note, scrawled in David's handwriting. It was addressed to Maya. If you are reading this, it means I've failed. You have to understand, Maya, I didn't want this life for you. But it's too late now. The people I worked with, they have more power than you can imagine. They can reach anyone, anywhere. I didn't think it would come to this, but they know everything. They're already watching you. Maya's breath caught in her throat. They're already watching you. Her mind reeled. Was this why she had been chosen? Why her life had been turned upside down by a mysterious box? Had she unknowingly become part of David's final mission? The warning was clear. The truth comes with a price. As she sat at the desk, trying to process everything she had learned, a sudden noise echoed from behind her. Maya's head snapped up, her pulse quickening. The door slammed shut with a force that made her jump, and the room was plunged into darkness. The lamp flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Maya fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim light from the hallway. It was the same man, the one who had spoken to her in the basement. He stepped forward, his face now visible. His expression was grave, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You shouldn't have opened that folder," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Maya stood up, her heart hammering in her chest. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The man's eyes flickered to the folder on the desk. "You're in danger, Maya. You've opened Pandora's box. The truth is more than you can handle." She took a step back, her mind racing. What truth? What is all of this? The man moved closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Project Nemesis was never just a government operation. It's something far more dangerous. Your husband, David, was a key player in a war that's been waged for years, one that you're now part of. They know you're here. They'd been waiting for you to find the truth. Maya's stomach turned as the weight of his words sank in. "Who are they?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Who's behind this?" The man's face softened for a moment, but his eyes were full of sorrow. "The same people who are responsible for everything that's happening. The ones who control everything from the shadows. And now, Maya, they're coming for you." Before she could react, the lights went out completely. Maya felt a cold hand on her shoulder, spinning her around. She gasped, her heart racing as she saw nothing but darkness. "Run," the man whispered urgently. "They're here." Suddenly, the air seemed to shift. Maya's breath quickened, and a deafening noise filled the room. The sound of doors slamming, footsteps, and distant voices. It was too late. The truth had come at a cost. The secrets she had uncovered were only the beginning. In the distance, she heard sirens wailing. Police, perhaps. But what could they do? They weren't prepared for this. Maya ran, her body fueled by adrenaline. She had no choice now. The game had changed, and she was at the center of it. As she stumbled through the darkened house, the final thought echoed in her mind. The truth wasn't the answer. It was just the beginning of a far greater nightmare. And now, Maya was trapped inside it. Maya ran as fast as her legs could carry her, her mind in a blur of confusion and fear. The darkness seemed to close in around her, the shadows shifting with every turn she made. The sudden weight of the situation crashed down on her, but there was no time to process it. No time to think, only to survive. The mysterious man's words echoed in her ears. "They're coming for you." She didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but the sense of danger felt real. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Her heart raced, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. She burst through the back door of the basement and into the cold night air. The yard was quiet, almost too quiet. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over everything. Maya paused for a moment, her body tense, listening for any sounds of pursuit. Nothing. But she knew better than to think she was safe. The moment she stepped into the yard, she felt the weight of eyes on her, watching, waiting. She wasn't alone. Before she could move, the distant sound of an engine roared to life, breaking the silence. Maya's eyes widened. She whipped around, her pulse spiking. The headlights of a car cut through the darkness as it screeched around the corner of the house. There was no way she could outrun it. She had to think fast. She darted toward the dense trees at the far side of the property, her feet pounding the earth beneath her. She didn't know who was after her, but she was certain they were close. She could feel their presence, like a shadow stalking her every step. Just as she reached the tree line, a figure stepped out from behind one of the trees. Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The figure was tall, dressed in dark clothing, their face hidden beneath a hood. The faint outline of a weapon glinted in the moonlight. "Stop right there," the figure commanded, their voice cold and hard. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't hesitate. She couldn't. She turned and sprinted deeper into the woods, her feet slipping on the uneven ground. Branches scratched at her skin as she pushed through the underbrush, her lungs burning from the exertion. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder, closer. Whoever this person was, they were not giving up. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of her, their branches thick and tangled. Maya couldn't see much in the darkness, but she kept running, not daring to slow down. She had to find shelter, somewhere to hide, somewhere to gather her thoughts. Her foot caught on a rock, sending her sprawling forward into the dirt. She gasped, scrambling to her feet, but by the time she looked up, the figure was almost upon her. With a surge of panic, Maya reached for the first thing she could find, a large branch lying on the ground. She swung it at the figure, desperate to protect herself. The branch hit them square in the chest, and the person staggered back, momentarily stunned. Maya didn't wait for them to recover. She turned and ran again, her heart racing in her chest. She pushed her body to its limit, ignoring the pain in her legs and the ache in her lungs. She had no choice. She couldn't let them catch her. She reached a small clearing and saw an abandoned cabin up ahead. Its windows were dark, the door hanging slightly ajar. Maya dashed toward it, her hands shaking as she pushed the door open. She slammed it shut behind her, her breath coming in frantic bursts. The cabin was empty, its interior covered in dust. Old furniture was scattered haphazardly, and cobwebs hung in the corners. Maya didn't care. She needed to catch her breath and think. She pressed her back against the door, her eyes scanning the room. There was no sign of anyone following her yet, but she knew it wouldn't be long. The mysterious man's warning echoed in her mind again. They're already watching you. She couldn't hide forever. She had to make a plan. As she stood there, trembling and unsure of what to do next, she heard the sound of an engine once again. The car was back, and it was closing in on her location. Her stomach dropped. She had nowhere to go. The door suddenly creaked open behind her. Maya spun around, her heart skipping a beat. The mysterious figure had found her. "Where are you going, Maya?" The voice was low and menacing. Maya's eyes darted around the cabin, looking for anything that might help her escape. But the room was bare. There was no back door, no windows to climb out of. She was trapped. The figure stepped closer, their face still hidden in the shadows. They reached out, grabbing her wrist with a grip like iron. "I told you, you can't escape," the figure said, their voice cold. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She had no choice. She had to fight back. She slammed her free fist into their face. But they didn't flinch. Instead, they pulled her toward the door with an ease that made her feel small and powerless. She wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. Maya dug her heels into the floor, but the figure was too strong. They dragged her out of the cabin and into the blinding headlights of the car parked nearby. "Stop," Maya shouted, her voice hoarse. "Please, tell me what's going on. Who are you? Why are you after me?" The figure didn't answer. They shoved her into the back seat of the car, slamming the door shut behind her. The engine roared to life again, and the car sped off into the night. Maya's thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She had no idea where they were taking her or what would happen next. But one thing was certain: she wasn't safe, and unless she could find a way to break free, she was running out of time. As the car zoomed down the road, she cast one last look at the darkened woods behind them. "They're coming for you," she remembered. "The truth is more dangerous than you think." And Maya was about to find out just how true that was. The car sped through the dark, winding roads, its engine growling like a beast in the night. Maya sat in the back seat, her hands trembling in her lap, the weight of her situation pressing down on her. The figure sitting in the front seat hadn't said a word since they'd taken her, and the silence in the car was suffocating. Maya could feel the tension thick in the air, the kind that made her skin crawl. She had no idea where they were taking her, or why. Her mind was a swirl of questions, each one more urgent than the last. Who were these people? What did they want with her? And why had she been dragged into this nightmare? She risked a glance at the person in the front seat, but they were still hooded, their face hidden in shadow. It was almost as if they weren't even human, their movements stiff and calculated, as if they weren't truly alive at all. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had to get out of here. But how? She leaned forward, trying to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" The figure didn't respond at first. For a moment, it seemed as though they hadn't heard her. But then the low, cold voice of the driver broke the silence. "You don't know who you are, do you?" the voice asked, filled with something that almost sounded like amusement. "You think this is just random, that this is all a mistake. But it's not. You're part of something bigger." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Part of something bigger. What was he talking about? She opened her mouth to ask, but before she could say anything, the car came to a sudden stop. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a large metal building in front of them. It looked abandoned, the windows covered in grime, the doors rusted. Maya felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the figure in the front seat turned and looked at her. The moment their eyes met, she could feel the weight of their gaze, as if they were seeing through her. "You've been chosen," the figure said, their voice barely more than a whisper now. "You don't have a choice. Not anymore." Maya's confusion deepened. Chosen for what? She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all she could do was sit there, helpless. The door was pulled open, and a strong hand reached in to grab her arm. Without another word, they pulled her out of the car, dragging her across the dirt toward the looming building. The cold night air bit at her skin, but she hardly noticed it. Her mind was consumed with questions, and each one seemed to make the situation feel more and more impossible. She was thrown into a dimly lit hallway, the walls cold and damp. The building smelled musty, as if it hadn't been used in years. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking straight into a trap. But there was nowhere to run. They led her down the corridor and into a small, sterile room. It was bare except for a single metal chair in the center of the floor. The walls were lined with strange symbols that Maya didn't recognize, their meaning completely foreign to her. The moment she entered the room, the door slammed shut behind her, leaving her alone in the dim light. She turned to face the figure who had brought her here. They stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her with cold, calculating eyes. Then, finally, they spoke. "You're the key," they said, their voice devoid of emotion. "You don't understand yet, but you will." Maya felt a wave of panic wash over her. The key. What did that even mean? Her mind raced as she struggled to make sense of it all. She wanted to shout, to demand answers, but something in the figure's demeanor made her hesitate. There was no point in arguing. Not yet, at least. She needed to figure out what was going on. The figure stepped forward, their hand reaching for the small box that had been with Maya since the beginning. Maya's heart raced as the figure carefully placed the box on the table in front of her. She hadn't seen it since the moment it had been delivered to her doorstep. The moment she'd opened it, everything had changed. But how? What was inside that made it so important? "Open it," the figure ordered. "You need to see for yourself." Maya's fingers hovered over the box. She was afraid, unsure of what would happen next. But she had no choice. She had to know. With a trembling hand, she lifted the lid. Inside the box was a small, intricately carved stone, glowing faintly in the dim light. It seemed almost alive, its surface pulsing with energy. The moment her fingers touched it, a sharp shock ran through her body. She gasped, pulling her hand back, but the stone seemed to hum with power. The figure watched her closely, their expression unreadable. "You're more than just a person," they said, their voice now carrying a note of finality. "This stone is your birthright. It was meant for you all along. Your true purpose is tied to it." Maya's head was spinning. She didn't understand. Birthright. True purpose. The stone was just a rock, wasn't it? Before she could say anything, the figure spoke again, their voice suddenly heavy with urgency. "You've been awakened, Maya. You are part of a centuries-old prophecy. The world is changing, and you are the one who will either save it or destroy it. The choice is yours." Her breath caught in her throat. Save the world. Destroy it. The figure turned toward the door. "You're not alone in this. Others are waiting for you, but they won't come until you're ready." Maya sat there, staring at the stone in her hands. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. This was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. But one thing was certain: her life would never be the same again. The door to the room creaked open, and the figure disappeared into the shadows. Maya was left alone with the stone, its strange glow casting an eerie light across the room. The weight of her new reality was almost too much to bear. But as she sat there, the stone in her hands, a single thought crossed her mind. There's no going back now. Maya sat in the cold, dimly lit room, the stone pulsing in her hands, its glow now brighter than ever. Her mind was spinning, a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and questions. Everything had changed since the moment that box had appeared at her door. Everything she knew had been turned upside down. And now she was faced with the weight of a decision, one she didn't understand but knew was important. The choice is yours. The figure's words echoed in her mind, haunting her like a distant whisper in the darkness. What did it all mean? Save the world or destroy it? How could she, a simple woman with no power, no special training, be the one to make such a decision? The stone in her hand seemed to burn with the weight of it all, urging her to act, but she was frozen, unsure of what to do. The room felt smaller, the air heavier with every passing second. She stood up from the chair, pacing in circles, trying to make sense of the impossible situation she found herself in. Outside, the wind howled against the walls of the building, as if the universe itself was warning her to run. But where would she go? To whom could she turn for answers? She glanced at the stone again. The symbols on it now seemed to shift, almost as though they were alive, moving just beneath the surface. There was something undeniably powerful about it, something ancient, something that resonated deep within her soul. This wasn't just a random object. It was tied to her very being. For the first time since she'd received the box, Maya felt a strange pull toward the stone. It was as though it was calling to her, whispering promises of knowledge and power, of a destiny that she couldn't yet comprehend. She couldn't deny it. It felt like her life had been leading her here, to this very moment. But what would it mean? Would she be able to control whatever power lay within the stone, or would it consume her, just like it had consumed the people who had brought her here? She couldn't shake the fear that the wrong choice could mean the end of everything. Suddenly, the door to the room opened with a loud creak, and Maya spun around, her heart racing. A figure stood in the doorway, their silhouette barely visible in the low light. They had no face, just shadows, but the presence was enough to make her pulse quicken. "You're still here," the figure said, their voice distant and low. It wasn't the same voice as the one who had brought her here, but it carried the same weight of authority. "You haven't made your choice yet." Maya stood frozen, the stone still clutched tightly in her hands. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. "What happens if I don't choose?" The figure stepped forward, their form gradually coming into focus. It was a woman, tall and regal, her eyes cold and knowing. She looked at Maya, her expression unreadable. "If you don't choose," the woman replied, her voice tinged with sadness, "then the world will choose for you. And the world is not kind to those who refuse their destiny." Maya's throat tightened. The weight of the words hit her harder than she expected. What did it mean for the world to choose for her? Could she bear the consequences of failing to decide? "Why me?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Why am I the one?" The woman smiled, a hint of something almost pitying in her expression. "Because you're not just anyone. You've always known there was more to this world, haven't you? Deep down, you felt it. It was always part of you. This power, it's not something that can be taught or learned. It's something you were born with. And now, it's your time to decide how to use it." Maya shook her head, still unsure. "I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I can control it." The woman stepped closer, her gaze softening, though the weight of her presence remained. "You don't have to do this alone. There are others. They are waiting for you, and they are ready to help you understand." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Others? Who were they? Where were they? "They're close," the woman said, as if reading her thoughts. "But they will only come if you embrace your role, if you choose the path that is yours to walk." Maya looked down at the stone again. The power it held seemed to pulse more strongly now, as if sensing her indecision. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. And for a moment, it felt like the room was closing in. She needed answers. She needed to understand what would happen if she chose the wrong path, but no one could give her those answers. The woman's voice broke through her thoughts again. "You are the key, Maya, but you are also the decision. The world cannot move forward unless you do. If you refuse, the consequences will be dire. The balance will break. Everything you know will be destroyed." Maya felt the truth of her words deep in her gut. This wasn't just some random twist of fate. It was a turning point, a moment that could change everything, for better or worse. She had no more time to question. She had no more time to doubt. She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the stone. For a brief second, she thought she could feel the world shifting around her, like everything was about to collapse in on itself. Then, with a slow exhale, Maya made her choice. She raised the stone above her head, holding it up to the ceiling as the light from it grew brighter. For a moment, it felt like the entire world stopped. Time itself held its breath. With a fierce determination, Maya spoke the words she had been too afraid to say. "I choose." The stone hummed with energy, the symbols on it glowing bright, pulsing with power. And in that moment, Maya felt something change within her. It wasn't just the stone that was alive. It was her. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, filling every part of her, unlocking something deep within. The woman stepped back, her expression approving. "It is done." Maya looked down at the stone in her hands, now fully aware of what she had just unleashed. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had chosen. She had embraced her destiny. And as the building around her seemed to hum with the same energy that now thrummed in her veins, Maya knew one thing for sure. The world was never going to be the same again.